Hello dear viewer, welcome to our lesson, Primary 6 class, Social Studies. My name is John Professor Modin, and today we are going to be beginning our discussion from pages 41 to 45. So those who have the workbooks, kindly go to that page 41 so that you will be able to follow what we are discussing. So in the previous lesson, we began understanding these movements, these migrations that happened long ago. Remember, we are still in our primary 6 class, and we say that in this class we are basically looking at East Africa. And in the previous lesson, we were looking at the migration pattern. Those are the ethnic groups moving from one place to another. And we are going to be looking at mainly those that migrated from different parts of Africa and they came to settle in East Africa. So in the previous discussion, we had these migrations, the types, and then examples in each type. I believe you watched that video, that lesson, and you have that knowledge. It's the one that's going to drive you to this that you're here to discuss. In case you did not watch it, make sure after watching this one, you go back to the other one also so that you'll be able to have all this knowledge integrated. Now, today, we are going to be looking at the examples of these ethnic groups that we already learned about. This lesson is also more of the main revision, or that we shall be introducing some new things where necessary. So, in primary 5, we learned about these ethnic groups, and even in this primary 6, we are going to be looking at these ethnic groups. Our heading reads, examples of ethnic groups in East Africa. Now, like I've always said, we are mainly looking at East Africa, and here we are beginning with our table, which gives us the ethnic group, the origin. Remember, this origin in the previous lesson, we also called it cradle land. So if one does not use origin, one can use cradle land. You can be asked, which was the cradle land of the Cushites? So you need to note that the cradle land, we are meaning the origin, or sometimes we can call it the homeland. So you should be knowing that. So we have our ethnic group, we have the origin, that is the cradle land, that is where this ethnic group came from. Then we have the occupation. The occupation here, we are mainly looking at the major or the main economic activity that this ethnic group was doing. That is what we are going to be taking there. So our first ethnic group is that of the Cushites. We have the Cushites that we can also call Hamites. We need to be aware of this. Cushites or Hamites. Here we are saying these ones came from the Ethiopian highlands, and their major occupation or their main economic activity was what we call cattle keeping, meaning these were people who could move from one place to another with their large numbers of cows. I mean, with very many cattle looking for water and pasture. Then two, we have the second ethnic group. Remember, we said in the previous lesson that these ethnic groups can also be called tribal groups. I mean, we can also call them, the tribal groups. I believe you still have that. So we have the Bantu that we say they came from the Cameroon highlands. This one is not new, even in primary 4, 3, 5, we talked about this. And their major occupation was cultivation. That is what we can also write as crop growing. So that is something which is very simple for us because we already talked about it. Then we have the Nilotics. Remember, when we have this, we would be having the group of Nilotes. In this group of Nilotes, we have the subgroups, whereby we have the Nilotics that I have tried to write in short because I didn't have enough space here. So I have written RLN, which simply means the river lake Nilotes. This one is not new to you, I'm so sure. So the Nilotics, we also call them the river lake Nilotes. Remember, it is under the group of Nilotes. Then the other group of Nilotes is what we call the plain Nilotes, that we can also write as the Nilohamites. Nilohamites. I want you to remember that map that you were drawing in primary 5, showing those tribal migrations. I mean, the directions that these ethnic groups used. The Hamites, the Hamites, then we had the Nilotics, we had the Nilohamites. Then the other third group of the Nilotes, we have what we call the highland Nilotes. We said in our primary 5, these are the ones that settled in highland areas or in hilly areas. And they also form that group of the Nilotes. Now, the origin, we have the River Lake Nilotes coming from Bahr el Ghazal, that is in South Sudan, and we have their economic activity, that is cattle keeping. The other one is the plain Nilotes that we have called the Nilohamites, also cattle keepers, and these ones were from Ethiopian highlands, and then the highland Nilotes, the same Ethiopian highlands, and were also cattle keepers, meaning their activity was cattle keeping. We need to get the difference there. Sometimes we are asked what was the occupation, and if a question is asking like that, the question wants you to write that economic activity. Sometimes children mess up. You are asked what was the major occupation of the Nilotics. Instead of you saying cattle keeping, you say cattle keepers. The Nilotics were, no, mention the activity. What were they doing? The same applies if you are asked what were the major occupation of the Bantu. You will end up again messing up by saying crop cultivators, or maybe you say cultivators. Or sometimes some children say the Nilotics were crop growers. No, mention the activity. The activity is cultivation, that we can simply call crop growing. That is how we answer these questions in a very simple way. And then we have the Sudani people that came from Juba, that is in South Sudan, and they were also cattle keepers. That is cattle keeping as an activity. Now, we have our sketch map on the board. We have a sketch map. There was no, sorry, it does not have the heading, but now I'm giving it a heading. Sketch map of East Africa, showing the directions used by the ethnic groups to enter into this East African map. So we are having the directions. Of course, we have tried to put our elements of a good map. We have our compass here, we have our key the other side. We go. So, in East Africa, we said we are having Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. We have two countries here, Rwanda, and then we have Burundi. We are having the directions, those are the movements of these ethnic groups. Now, our key enables us to understand what is in this, or what has been represented on this map. We have the first movement, which shows this kind of arrow, and we are saying that is the Bantu, which means when we come to our map, we shall be looking at, when we see this, it means this is these are the Bantu. We have other Bantu tribes entering from here, and then we have the other ones entering from the southern. These are the ones we call the Ngoni. In your book, you will find in your map, down there they are written Ngoni. So this was the last Bantu tribe. We shall be looking at that when we go and look at the Bantu detail. You will find that the Ngoni were the last tribal group, or they were the last group of the Bantu to enter East Africa, and they entered through the southern part of East Africa, that is through Tanzania, as we can see from the map. And then we have this kind of drawing, this kind of arrow on our board, which shows us that those were the Hamites, which means when we come to this, you will find that we shall be having that kind of drawing here. And also, remember, the Hamites also, when we were in primary 5, we talked about Hamites entering through the southwestern part, entering into Uganda. So here we are having two areas or two directions. We have the Hamites entering from the southwestern part, that is into Uganda, and then also they entered through the northeastern part, and they came into Uganda. Our next showing, our next arrow is having it shaded in this way. And it's telling us that these ones were the plain Nilotes that we also called the highland, the Nilohamites. The Nilohamites. We say these ones came from Ethiopian highlands, so we have them coming from Ethiopian highlands, from Ethiopia, and they entered into East Africa like this. Now in primary 5 still, we were looking at this map of Uganda. We were able to show these Nilohamites entering through the northeastern part of Uganda, that is entering Uganda, forming the other tribes that we talked of, the Kangojongs, the Langi, we have the Iteso, and the Mam. So that one was there. And then we have another one which entered through Lake Turkana. This is Lake Turkana. Lake Turkana in Kenya. So this one also came and settled in that northwestern part of Kenya. And then the other last one is showing us this kind of arrow, and this we are saying these were the Nilotics that we also called the River Lake Nilotes. Remember we said these ones came from Bahr el Ghazal, that is in South Sudan. So which means if we are having our Uganda here, so we are having these people coming from Southern Sudan, that is in Bahr el Ghazal, and remember we said they followed the Nile. That's why we call them the River Lake Nilotes. They lived along the Nile Valley and they came and settled in Uganda. We say when they entered Uganda, they had their first settlement in a place that was known as Pubungo. I want you to remember this lesson in your primary 5 class. We said when the Nilohamites, when the River Lake Nilotes, those are the Nilotics, entered Uganda, they first had their first settlement at Pubungo. That is before them splitting. That is when we go back to the other story of Gipir and Nabong, developing that misunderstanding, and we have the two brothers separating. So that made Gipir to cross the Nile to the west, the West Nile region, as we learned about in our primary 5 class. So this group is the one we call the Nilotics, that we can also call River Lake Nilotes. So that is about our map, and I believe you have understood this. We have the Bantu entering. Some of them entered from the western. For us, when we were in primary 5, we were looking at Uganda, we say the Bantu entered through the western part of Uganda. As you can see, they entered through the west, but we have also understood that we are now talking of East Africa. You'll find that there are some Bantu that entered through the southwestern, and then we have those that entered through the southern. That is the Ngoni group, as we have already talked about. Now, having understood that, we are going to be looking at these ethnic groups one by one, such that we shall be able to discuss more about them. And the first we are having on our board is that group that we call the Hamites, that we can also call the Cushites. Now, we have made this to be our first one because it was the first tribal group, or it was the first group, or it was the first ethnic group to come to East Africa. Which means, if a question is asked to you, which was the first ethnic group to come to East Africa, we take the Cushites or the Hamites. It's the same. Whichever you write, you will get still a tick. So we are saying that these people came from Ethiopian highlands, as we already talked about here in this table. They came from the Ethiopian highlands. They entered into East Africa through the northeastern and southwestern directions. That is what we are having in our second sentence. Then here we are continuing saying they were the first to enter. I have already explained this, and I have answered yet another question that you can be asked. They were the first ethnic group or tribal group to enter East Africa. And we have said mainly these people were they were cattle keepers. Don't forget that. They were mainly cattle keepers, which means their main economic activity was cattle keeping. That is in case you are asked for the activity. So what is very important when we are looking at these ethnic groups, Number one is we should be able to tell the cradle land of this ethnic group, as in where did these people come from. Having understood the cradle land, you also need to understand through which direction did they enter East Africa, or where did they pass when they were coming to East Africa. Then that's the second one. Having understood the direction, you also need to note which was their major economic activity. Then after getting to know that, it will drive us now to understand which were the reasons for their migration, meaning what made them to move, leaving their homeland, searching for other areas. So that is what we shall be looking at before we come to the tribes. So for that case, we look at the tribes, we have summarized them, and these very tribes are in your book. We have them in Uganda, we have these people in Kenya, and we have them in Tanzania and Rwanda and Burundi. So we have summarized, we have in Uganda, we have the Bahima, the Bahinda, we have the Batutsi, and then we have the Basita. These are the ones in Uganda. Going to Kenya, we have the Kinje, we have the Gala, the Boran, the Somali, and the Rendile. All these are the ones that we have in Kenya. Crossing to Tanzania, we have the Iraq and the Mbugu people. And in Rwanda and Burundi, we have the Tutsi. So these are the tribes that form the Kushites, I mean the Hamites. It's the same. We go to the reasons, as I said, because we have talked about their origin, we have understood the direction of entry, we have understood their major occupation as cattle keeping. Now we look at which reasons made them to migrate. And this, in the previous lesson, we had already summarized them. I had made you aware that when we are looking at the reasons, the first thing for us to consider is what was their major occupation. Because it's from there that we can be able to tell what must have made these people to leave that homeland. Now, for example, we are saying the Kushites were cattle keepers, which means that these people must have moved looking for areas with better pasture and water for their animals. And that becomes our first strong answer. And that's why I have made it to be number one. They were moving looking for water and pasture for their animals. I want you to be able to write the word pasture very well. Don't write pasture. Some of you always make mistakes. Looking for water and pasture for their animals. Secondly, these people were hit by prolonged drought, meaning they experienced a lot of sunshine, which dried up their water bodies for the animals to get water. And also, of course, you know, if there is no rain, then pasture will be a problem, which of course brings this. And then we have this one saying these people became overpopulated, meaning those that were now lacking where to graze their cows or where to settle had to go looking for areas which were not occupied by the people. Then we had internal wars that we say they would have internal misunderstandings within themselves. And then also we have external attacks. That is some other communities coming to attack them. And when they are defeated, of course, they will be chased to go and get other areas to occupy. Now, what we need to understand is that when these people were moving like that, of course, I say they were now looking for areas to occupy or areas to settle in. And as they were moving like that, we also need to understand, in fact, we just need to remember what we learned already in that primary 5 class. In P5, we said, before the coming of these ethnic groups, we had the people in Uganda who were called the Bushmen. That one, we learned about that. We had the people called the Bushmen. So, what we can say is that when these Kushites came, of course, they also had to displace those Bushmen so that they could get where to settle and graze their cattle. So, those are the reasons for their migration. We cross to the contributions. Now, here in the contributions, we have what we call the positive effects. Those are the good things that these that these people brought into East Africa? How was their coming into East Africa beneficial? How was it good to the people of East Africa? So here we are saying these people introduced the idea of iron working. That's what we call iron smelting. We learned about this. The Kushites introduced the idea of iron smelting. A question can be asked to you. How did the Kushites, or how did the Hamites improve on the technology in East Africa? Of course, that is answered already here by introducing the idea of iron smelting, that is making tools or weapons out of iron. And then we have, they introduced the longhorn cattle. There we mean the cattle with very long horns. They are the ones also that introduced them. And then they introduced new cultures into East Africa. The other one would be, they increased, and this one cuts across. It can be a negative effect as well as a positive effect. Here in the negative effects of these Kushites, we are saying they displaced the original inhabitants, as we have already said. And those inhabitants are the ones we have called the Bushmen, as we wrote them here. So that is the first negative effect. They led the displacement of the original inhabitants. When we talk of original inhabitants, we mean the people who had already settled, or the owners of that area, the ones who were already there. So they displaced them, and we are saying those people were called Bushmen. 2, we are saying these people led to overstocking. Overstock meaning that as they brought these other animals with them, as they came with a lot of livestock, that is animals, of course they now increased on the number of animals in the country, in East Africa, and of course due to overstocking, they are now results, like it can lead to, like the soil can be, the vegetation ends up being eaten up by these too many animals, and that will lead to soil erosion. So they led to overstocking of domestic animals. And then lastly, we are saying these Kushites increased the population. Of course, when you talk of population, we are meaning the number of people living in an area. So they increased on the population of East Africa. And I say this one can cut across. It can be a negative effect, can also be a positive effect. Remember, having a high population is good. At the same time, it can be bad. So you will even have that point here. Still, you will get a tick if you put it there. So it cuts across. So this is what we can share as for the case of the Kushites that we have also called the Hamites. Remember, we have said this was the first group this was the first ethnic group to come to East Africa. Now, let's go and look at another ethnic group apart from the Kushites. So in this next episode of our discussion, that is about the ethnic groups, the examples of these ethnic groups that came to East Africa, we are basically going to look at what we call the Bantu ethnic group. Of course, still this one is not new to us. We learned about this. So here is a writing. We are saying the Bantu form the largest ethnic group in East Africa. Now, we begin noting some important words in this discussion. The other first one that we talked about in the other previous one, we were looking at the Kushites. We say the other ones were the first to come to East Africa. Now, coming to the Bantu, we are saying these ones form the largest. So I want you to get the difference. The Bantu form the largest ethnic group in East Africa. They speak similar languages with the common root word "ntu." This is used when referring to things or person. This can be in a singular form, of which when pronounced in the plural form becomes Bantu, which means people. That is the meaning of Bantu. It's from here that they just add letter A to bring a Bantu, and they will have it as people. So when you are asked what does the word Bantu refer to, Bantu means people, as simple as that. So we continue. These people we are also going to understand, just like I say, we need to understand the cradle land, their major occupation, direction of entry. The cradle land was Cameroon Highlands. He said they came from the Cameroon Highlands and they were mainly cultivators, which means they were mainly crop growers. But remember, this is not the activity. If the question is asking you for the activity or the occupation, don't bring it like this. Say they were, the activity will be cultivation or crop growing. That is now the activity. We need to be very, very careful with that. They entered Uganda through the western direction and they settled in the interlacustrine region. This is what we need to understand. They settled in the interlacustrine region. Now, what do we mean by the interlacustrine region? We say the interlacustrine region refers to the areas between the Great Lakes of East Africa. The interlacustrine region refers to the areas between the Great Lakes of East Africa, which means we are to understand which are these Great Lakes of East Africa. We have Lake Victoria, we have Lake Choga, Lake Albert, Lake George, Lake Edward. All these are in Uganda. And then we have Lake Turkana, that is in Kenya. We have Lake Tanganyika, and then that is in Tanzania. And also we have Lake Malawi. So these are among others. If you look at the other map that we're having in our first episode of this discussion, you will find that you will be seeing those migration patterns. Those are the directions that the Bantu used. Others entered through western, others entered through the southwestern, that is through Lake Tanganyika, Malawi there. Then we have these other ones, the Ngoni, that entered through the southern part. So that is about the Great Lakes in East Africa. Having known this, we move to look at the reasons that made them to choose settling in the interlacustrine region, meaning which are the reasons that made them to settle in the interlacustrine region. We have the heading, reasons as to why the Bantu chose to settle in the interlacustrine region. For which reasons? One, those areas had fertile soil. Of course, we go back to our major economic activity of the Bantu. We say these people were mainly carrying out crop growing, that is cultivation. So because of that, it meant that these people had to look for areas that had fertile soil. They had to look for areas that had reliable rainfall, areas that received a lot of rainfall so that their crops could grow well easily. So those are the factors that they were considering, and they found those factors in the interlacustrine region due to the presence of fertile soil. And then we have the presence of reliable rainfall, that we can say enough rainfall in the interlacustrine region. Then our next heading gives us the examples of these Bantu tribes that we have. Of course, we shall begin from Uganda. That's where we are airing out from. We have the Baganda that form the largest in Uganda. This one, we understood this. The Baganda form the largest ethnic group that is in the Bantu in Uganda. And in Uganda, they are the largest ethnic group already. Even there is no other tribe which is as large as this of the Baganda. So in the group of the ethnic group, they are the largest. In the whole of Uganda, they are the largest. Then we have the Basoga, the Batoro, the Bachiga. We have the Runyankore, the Basamia, the Bagweri. Then we have the Bagisu, the Batwa, the Bakonzo, then we have the Banyoro, among others that are in Uganda. In Kenya, we have the Akamba, we have the Kikuyu. These are also in Kenya. These form the largest ethnic, Bantu tribe. In Kenya, we have the Pokomo, we have the Embu, then we have the Mijikenda, we have the Luhya, that we can also call the Abaluya. then we have the Taita, the Meru, the Guzi, then the Ndebele. You change in your notes, you have here R, make it L, that is Ndebele tribe. And when we go to to Tanzania, we have the Nyamwezi, then we have the Chaga, the Hehe, the Ngoni, that we said entered through the southern direction. We have the Fifa, there's a Ramo and the Yao, then we have the Sukuma, that we can also call the Wasukuma, also forming the largest in Tanzania, and then we have the Bahaya and the Makonde. So these are the ones that we have in Tanzania. And coming to Rwanda and Burundi, we have the Hutu people with the Hutu tribe that is in those countries. So for this, we shall have given a summary of these ethnic groups, I mean these tribes that belong to the Bantu ethnic group that is in East Africa. This note is reminding us, that is what we have already discussed. We say the Ngoni was the last Bantu tribe to migrate into East Africa. Remember we said they entered through the southern direction, and these are the people who were chased in South Africa by the Zulu warrior. That is the Shaka. Remember that Shaka Zulu war. I mean Shaka Zulu, the warrior of South Africa. So when some people were defeated, they had to run for their lives due to that war, and they entered East Africa through that southern direction, forming the tribe we have as the Ngoni tribe. Then we have the Bantu groups that migrated into East Africa. These Bantu groups we now group those tribes that we have talked according to groups, like looking at how they migrated and how they settled. We have those that form the Western group. Of course, this one, we look at those that came from the, like the one that entered Uganda through the Western direction, the Baganda, and then we have the Bachiga, all those form the Western. Then we have the Southern Bantu. Of course, the Southern Bantu, we are looking at the other ones that came from the south. That's where we have the Ngoni, the Central Bantu, and then mainly we have those in Tanzania, and then the Highland Bantu. Those are the ones that settled in highland areas like Kikuyu. So those are the groups of the Bantu that we have. Next in the discussion, we go to discuss the reasons for the migration. As I already told you in the previous ethnic groups, what is very important is we need to identify the major occupation. Now we are looking at the Bantu, and the major occupation was cultivation. Now, which was the main reason for migration? The first reason, which should be taken in your head, was looking for fertile soil. Looking for fertile soil for crop growing. Looking for fertile soil for crop growing. Now, here, there are some that cannot come here. Like in the other group of the Kushites, we talked of looking for pasture and water for their animals. We brought that because these people those people were pastoralists. I mean, they were cattle keepers. Now here, we cannot bring looking for water and pasture for the animals because these ones were not cattle keepers. Remember in the beginning of our lesson, we said the Bantu were cultivators, crop growers, meaning we cannot bring the issue of looking for water and pasture here because they were not in that line of rearing cows. And then also, this Bantu became overpopulated. Some of them became overpopulated, that is overpopulation, meaning some people who did not have where to settle had to move away. Then the floods, breaking out epidemic diseases in their homeland. Epidemic diseases. We have famine in their homeland. We had love for adventure. Love for adventure. Say there are those who just wanted to discover places. And then also we talked about influence. We talked about influence. In this line of influence, we said there were those that could move because they were seeing other people moving. They didn't have it in plan, but because they have seen their relatives, they have seen their colleagues, their friends moving with luggage on the head, could also just join, and they end up migrating. That's what they termed as migrating due to influence. Now, the next thing we are going to understand here is we need to understand which were the contributions. Just like we talked of the contributions of the Kushites, we also have to look at the contributions of this Bantu. I mean, which were those positive effects? Which good things did they introduce? Now, when we look at such things, we basically look at the line that they were in. We say these were crop growers, which means one of the things is that these people introduced new crops. Of course, they were growing crops, so they came with their new crops that they were willing to grow when they get such areas with fertile soil. So we can talk about the Bantu introducing new crops, the Bantu introducing new farming methods. For example, we have the application of cow dung, that is use of cow dung as manure. We take it to be the one which was introduced by this Bantu, that is introducing new crops, introducing new farming skills. Then when we come to look at, remember, these very people can also be having their disadvantages. So when it comes to the disadvantages, of course, still we shall be able to say that this Bantu also led to the displacement of the original inhabitants, meaning the areas where they settled, they had to chase the Bushmen who had already settled there. So that becomes a disadvantage. And also, we talk of overpopulation. They increased the number of people in East Africa, which I said in the previous episode that it can be both an advantage as well as a disadvantage. My dear children, thank you so much for viewing this lesson, and I believe you have understood it very well. May God bless you as you continue subscribing to watch more of our lessons. May God be with you.